Okay, I think we're live. That was the signal. Welcome to Fearless Flight Live, our weekly show. If you are afraid to fly, or if you know somebody who's afraid to fly, or just like to talk aviation with us, with me today is our lovely flight attendant, Diane, and our equally lovely but a bit scruffy Captain Eric Larson. Hey guys, how are you today?
We're good. We're good. We're good. We're lovely.
In case you might ask yourself, well, where in the world is Captain Ron? Captain Ron is on a mission with a fearful flyer as part of the elite custom coaching that we're offering. We're Captain Ron, or I think even you would fly with somebody, right, Captain Eric?
Sure.
Absolutely. Where he's on his way to Europe right now, or actually he might already currently be in Spain. And we'll have a little bit more on that next week on the show, because we'll also be having our Fearless Flight Crew Edition next week as well. And let me just get this started here. We are, there you go. One of the things that we want to show you today is we've gotten a couple of questions about the Boeing 737 MAX. Mainly, is it safe? And a couple of those questions. We have a poll question for you. We have an amazing birds of a feather success story to share. And we're also going to talk a little bit about airports, the TSA, and how you can navigate during a busy summer travel season. And I think let's jump into the birds of a feather, because if you're not a member of our Facebook group, Birds of a Feather, then I highly encourage you to join, because that's really an amazing forum and community where you can ask questions, you get support, and people share their challenges. And in today's case, want to start with a success story. And today's story is Joey Monto, and Joey has been with Fearless Flight for a number of years. Actually has been on the show as well, but he posted just a couple of days ago in the Facebook group, and I just found it so touching. And it's a longer post, and it's this beautiful image that he posted with it, but what really touched me was I made the choice to no longer allow the fear to win, and I've overcome this. And if you fear flying, you can overcome this too. It's not easy overcoming any fear, or it's unpleasant actually. And it takes hard work and perseverance. Amen to that. But once you expose the fear for what it is, a false experience appearing real, you feel the weight of that fear totally lifted off your shoulders. Victory is yours. And I just honestly, I mean, how do you feel when you read something like that, having worked with fearful flyers for many years? Like, Diane,
it's just, I know it's going to sound funny, but I just get kind of warm and fuzzy inside. I do. It's everything. It's everything that we all here hope for and strive for, and why we do all the things we do as far as classes and webinars and our Tuesday night, this particular show. I mean, this is everything we are dedicated to.
Mm-hmm.
To see someone put it in such really elegant terms. It's very elegant. It just kind of goes, oh my God, we are actually helping. We're helping people help themselves, which is the big part. We're really not doing that much at all, but we're giving them a portal to help themselves. And it's just like, it's kind of like, oh my God, the baby birds are out of the nest and it's wonderful.
And paying it forward. That's what I love.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Okay.
Because so many times, especially in this day and age, everything, is going to be told to you it's quick and you don't know, no, it's a process. And we don't know where you are in that process when you come, to Fearless Flight. But no matter where you are, we do have, a lot of things that we can share, but you are the one who has to have the drive, the determination, the courage, the anger sometimes, whatever it may be that gets you to follow through with it. And I think in that post, actually, Joey said he white knuckled to his wedding or something like that.
Oh, jeez.
So it's come along.
Stress on a lot of different levels.
Yes. And most recently he flew to Israel and back. So quite the trip. Captain Eric, we got a couple of questions about the Boeing 737 MAX, and we haven't talked about this in a long time. So I thought the number one question is obviously from people who are about to fly, and they, can check online and they see they're flying on a 737 MAX. Are there any issues? So that's the first thing. Do I have to be worried? And is whatever was the problem, is it fixed? And what was the problem? And so we have a couple of slides, and I hope that you can just start by giving us an update why the plane is safe to fly.
I'll sure do that. And in case anybody has to go to the bathroom or get an adult beverage, I'll give you my short answers. Should you be worried? No. And are there any remaining problems? And is there any reason for concern? No. That's the short answer. But we'll go into this a little bit, and I'll make it quick. But if you guys have further questions and want to send contact information to the show or something, I'd be glad to talk to you about it. We did beat this to death for a number of shows a couple of years ago when these incidents happened, and we may have covered some of that in one of the webinars in the library. I don't recall, but I'll be happy to talk about it a little bit right here.
Okay, so let me just share the our progress report on the 737 MAX. So first of all, there are several versions of the 737 MAX, right? There's 800, 900. Does it matter which one someone's on?
No, no, it does not. System-wise, they're all the same. It's only capacity that matters. And that's a fabulous paint job, by the way. I gotta love that thing. But that's a Boeing factory paint job. But no, it doesn't matter from system functions with respect to system functions.
Okay.
But if you want to throw up the slide, we'll talk about that a little bit.
Okay, so this is what it's all about, the MCAS, or Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. So what is that, and why did it even fail? I guess that's what it really did. Or if you want to go ahead with that, Eric, then.
So this is a great slide, and what happened, and it was an immense corporate screw up by Boeing initially. They had installed the system on the airplane and delivered it to operators without detailed explanations of how it worked, the installation and what was going on in the operational manuals. And I think there was only one or two airlines that figured it out from tearing apart systems manuals, what the story was. But essentially, what they were doing was they had installed a system to assist the pilots should the airplane be approaching an aerodynamic stall, which we've talked about. When the wing hits a critical angle of attack, airflow breaks away from the top surface of the wing, and the lift is destroyed and the airplane falls. The MCAS was designed to prevent the airplane from getting to that critical angle of attack. The fault was that it had a very aggressive corrective characteristics. And the worst part was what the picture Dieter is showing. Slides 1 and 2 show the little angle of attack indicator, which is near the nose, and it shows the relative angle of wind on the airplane. If you go to the next slide for a second, Dieter, can you do that and go back if you have to? Yeah. So here's where the angle of attack sensors are installed, and the MCAS system, for some reason, was wired through only one of those sensors. If one of those sensors detected a critical angle of attack, the airplane approaching a stall, it would initiate corrective action, which was violent, even by Boeing's own test pilots' statements. And what they've done now is to do what we call the system works only with two-channel indication. In other words, both sensors have to indicate that the airplane is approaching a critical angle of attack for the MCAS system to be activated. That was fix number one. And at least one of the two crashes, the problem was occurring because the sensor itself was failing and giving false information and activating the system. So now both of those must be activated or both of those must indicate a critical angle attack to activate the MCAS system. And the other thing they did that was a big deal was they tremendously restricted the corrective force that the MCAS system would apply. So it was not a violent correction. It can be overpowered by the pilots, and not nearly such a violent correction as it had when the original system was installed. And part three, probably more importantly, is all the systems manuals now explain how the MCAS system, how it works, how it's installed, what to do with corrective action. So all the flight crews have all this information available to them, and are able to also practice with it in the simulator. So that's the long answer. The short answer is this is not a reason for concern anymore, but at launch point that was a major problem.
And I think what's surprising, what we often talk about here on the show is that Swiss cheese model, and that being like different layers of Swiss cheese with holes in random places. It's very difficult to get a straight line through. So number one, it's surprising that they would have only used the one sensor rather than the redundancy, or at least the cross check, right?
Yes.
And we'll never know what truly the reason for that was, but obviously, unfortunately, they found out the hard way that it's good to put safety first.
Yeah, those are freakish events, and as you said, all the holes in the cheese lined up with tragic results in those two cases.
So that was one of the questions, and I actually want to share the first image one more time because we had a second question, and just so everybody knows what we're talking about, if you look closely here on the jet engines in the at the rear end, you can see that they're serrated, or at least the casing is serrated on those engines. And we had a question asking, why is that? why on most airplanes it seems they have a regular smooth finish, and why on this plane, or at least the 737 MAX there, why have a serrated finish there to the end of the engine?
Well, it's that serration on the nacelle of the engine occurs, or they have that on the 73 MAX on the LEAP engine and on the 787. It may be on other aircraft, but I'm not familiar with other aircraft that have it. But it's a combination of the length of the engine nacelle, or the cowl that covers the engine, and the positioning by the wing. The length of the nacelle there is kind of short, and the sawtooth back breaks up the airflow of the extremely hot air coming out at very high volume, and keeps the noise down, keeps it from battering the airplane and the wing as much, and just makes for more efficient gas flow coming out the back. And it just happens, because of the way the engine installation is and the shape of it, that's the more efficient way to do it. And the LEAP engines are I can't quote all the thrust ratings. I can look them up in a second, but for a 737, they're very powerful. They produce an awful lot of thrust.
Okay. All right. So that you could say that it's just more specific to that particular engine type, and it's obviously an innovation to create more efficiency. And I do have a question here from Don. Hey, Don. Don saying that there's been a lot of storms rolling through, and he'd like to know at what point, he says, first of all, I want to know from you who they are. Do they stop planes flying through dark clouds? And if we can identify who they are, how does that tie into with planes not taking off from airports where it's actually sunny, right? And you wonder why there's a delay. So if you can speak to that, Eric, that'd be awesome.
Well, it's always a curious thing to wonder who the they of they say is. But in fact, in this one case, we know who the theys are, and it's a collection of people, and one part of it is the pilots going, yeah, forget it. We're not going to go on that. We can read weather report. We're not blind, and we're not doing it. The other part is the dispatcher, who is the person who prepares the flight plans, for the pilots, and each flight is launched with a co-signed agreement between the pilots and the dispatcher. And the dispatcher can look at this stuff and say, yeah, this is a really bad idea. I'm not going to put my name on a release and send these guys there. And if they made it after hours of holding and delay, it would be pointless. And there's actually 4 parts of the 3-part deal. The third part is air traffic control going, this is so crazy. They have at localized standards at the airport. They're going, this is so nuts. We're going to cease operations at the airport here until things improve. And the 4th part, the airlines have got actually smarter over the years. It used to be, we'll launch everything, we'll plan for everything, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And then the news would have people sleeping in the airport, all up and down the concourses. It would be like Woodstock, only inside. It would all be horrible, and the airlines would go, well, sorry. Well, the airlines have actually figured out that this is a bad idea. And when they have gigantic weather events approaching hurricane or something like that, that they know is heavily going to impact operations in a hub, or hub connecting to another hub, they will, the operations control people that overlook all of the flight segments will go, listen, we need to pre-cancel this because it's only going to end up one way. So they'll remove that from the pilot dispatch thing saying, oh, okay, we know we're going to have a huge situation here. And rather than stranding 1 million people here, we'll just plan not to run the operation. So you have those four parties looking at that continuously, trying to determine is the operation safe, and B, is it a good idea?
And that's such a good point that you're bringing up, because up here in Canada, so we have two major airlines and one that is the most hated, Air Canada. But Air Canada is really just like WestJet. They're really in a pickle sometimes, because they are feeding people into the system in the US, and if anything there kind of ripples, it ripples all the way, and so flights get canceled and delayed with no apparent reason for the traveler. But like you said, there are people that watch the entirety of the flight network going on, and they can already say, hey, we got to cancel this, this, and this, even though that route might be clear. And so that is a much bigger operation, I think, than we even understand. When weather situations happen, that it has much greater impacts in how flight. Diane, you probably run into this.
I haven't been on for a few weeks, and I took a picture of it, a screenshot from FlightAware. I had a trip that we went from Dallas to College Station, and then from College Station was a turn. So we went to College Station, Texas, and back to Dallas. And it was along those lines. I mean, the weather was terrible. The weather is always terrible in Texas and in and out of Dallas. And this was no different. But we managed to get to College Station with no problem, and we were turning to come back. And there's another aspect to this. If we can get back, and it's the last flight of the day, and people are trying to connect, the airline will try to make that happen, as long as it's safe. And so I took a screenshot of our routing that ATC put us on, and the flight normally wheels up to wheels down from College Station back to Dallas, DFW, is about 29 minutes. When we went from College Station back to Dallas, it took us almost 2 hours. We were routed almost to Lubbock, Texas. I mean, the normal flight is from here to here. We went from here all the way around up to there. And you can see on the screenshot where the system was, and we had no problem. We had no bumps, we had no turbulence. It was perfectly fine, because it was the last flight out of College Station. We could get to Dallas safely. It just took us, like forever. Mm-hmm. So and Eric knows, I know nothing, but I do know that we have had flights. On our way from Dallas down to College Station, we did kind of the same thing. Instead of 28 or 29 minutes, it took us about an hour in order to avoid the storms, but to get people where they needed to go. Mm-hmm. And so I think that probably is a very small cog in the wheel of why a flight will get sent off. Okay, go ahead and go. As long as the pilots, as Eric said, as long as everybody said, yeah, okay, we're good with it. And it was very safe. Everything was very safe. We just took the scenic route.
Yes, no extra charge.
You could have driven from College Station to Dallas quicker than we flew, but we did it, and it was perfectly safe. So
awesome, thank you. So we got 2 more questions here. Actually, I'm gonna ask the second one first, because it seems to tie into this whole thing about delays, cancellations. And a question from Kay asked, there are so many plane cancellations, not enough pilots, I was told. So, and I'm gonna say, while that certainly plays a big factor, a lot of the times there are other factors that play into these cancellations, correct?
Go ahead, Diane.
I was going to say, go for it, Eric, and I can add in my little 2 cents after.
Well, yes, the factors we talked about before with the weather considerations, and those four part member parts, the pilots, the dispatchers, the ATC, and the systems operation control. But the other thing that can play in is ATC can go, even if there isn't weather involved, going, we can't handle that volume. We just cannot take that volume, and we have to spread this, delay it, push it out of the peaks, because they're struggling to retrain people. We're struggling to get new people on board. And I noticed the news headlines the last few days have showed that airports are hitting their peak volume ever, pre-COVID or post-COVID, and it's finite, the number of people you can move at one time, and everybody's itching to go somewhere, and it's summer, and sometimes it is just not possible, physically possible, to swallow or move that capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And another aspect too, that in regard specifically to weather, so it did not happen to us, but if you've got originally scheduled a 28 or 27 or whatever minute flight, and it turns into nearly 2 hours, pilots and flight attendants have a finite amount of time that they're allowed by law to fly. And so we can time out, and the pilots time out before we do. And so if all of a sudden, because of a delay, or you get rerouted, or whatever, those kinds of things happen, the pilots may be on the verge of exceeding their allowed flight time by the FAA. And so if they time out, they're done. And if you can't find a relief set of pilots, then the flight wherever it's supposed to go ain't gonna go anywhere.
Yeah,
and that's the same thing. That's the same thing with flight attendants. We are only allowed to fly so long, and then we say, "I'm sorry, but we're not allowed by law to fly anymore." And so that's it happens more if there's a maintenance problem, and certainly with weather when you have to take a lot longer to go somewhere. So,
thank you. I'm gonna ask the engine question second. I want to say hi to Gina. Welcome to Fearless Flight. I hope you enjoy the show as much as you can enjoy something that gives you heart palpitations. But Gina is saying, I'm flying for my friend's wedding, and I'm deathly afraid to get on the plane. How can I overcome this fear so I can be there for my best friend? So, Gina, without knowing your situation, here's how I recommend you start. So number one, I don't know how soon that wedding is. Depending on, maybe you want to put it in chat, then I can qualify my answer. But regardless of that, the first thing that I would recommend to you, if you haven't done so already, schedule a 15-minute free coaching call. I'm going to put the link in, in November. Perfect. So you got lots of time, which is awesome. Because many people who say what you just said fly on Friday. You know, that's a little bit more challenging. So it can absolutely be done. But since you have more time, my best recommendation is this. First of all, there is 6 seasons of Fearless Flight live shows on YouTube and Facebook. So definitely, if you want, have a look through any of these shows. All of that's free content that's available to you. Head over to fearlessflight.com. If especially if turbulence and takeoffs are your triggers, then we have a free guide for you that you can download. And then we have different products and services that may help you. But the first thing I would recommend, if you haven't done so, join the Birds of a Feather Facebook group. Once you know your trigger, that's what we call the things that get you started when you start thinking about your flight, because you say you're deathly afraid, but you're probably deathly afraid of 1 or 2 specific things, and that's what we call triggers, and there's two categories. The category that is easier, I'm gonna say, is everything to do with mechanical parts. And okay, perfect. And you're actually the emotional part. Because Gina just wrote, I think it's just the unknown and not being in control, the not being on the ground part. So that would be more so you're afraid that you are losing control, not just going on the plane and somebody else is actually flying and you're not in control like you would be in a car. But you may also be afraid to lose control of your own emotions, your own feelings. And, some people have visions of being carted off the airplane, and I'm going to say that really doesn't happen to fearful flyers, because most of you are really almost indistinguishable on the outside from regular passengers, but on the inside is where all the action happens. So the first thing would be identifying that, yeah, I feel exactly the same. You're not alone. That's what Carrie is saying. That's why we do this show, Gina, really. So identify those triggers. What is it? Not being in control. Is it more the claustrophobia? Do you have issues, riding elevators or being, in other situations? Because usually there's a trail that kind of leads to your fear of flying. And I'm in the 1%. I'm afraid that I'll be in that 1% in a plane crash that I'm so scared of. Okay, Eric, do you remember the numbers from the MIT professor that we had on?
I can see it. So we had this very nice fellow, and I'll think of his name after we get off the show.
Arnold Barnett.
Thank you. Who is a
Dr. Arnold Barnett,
professor of probability and stat at MIT. This is not a stupid guy. And he's a nervous flyer, or was a nervous flyer, and he constructed a pyramid for us on your odds of dying in a plane crash. And he has this whole pyramid going, and the stuff you could do, the odds are greater of you being elected president and winning a gold medal in the Olympics. Both of those, the odds are much greater of that than being elected, than being killed in a plane crash. I mean, it's infinitesimal. And then he has the number of years you would have to fly to actually possibly hit into this level, and it's all in scientific notation because it's about longer than time has gone on. So thinking, oh man, nothing bad has happened to me. So a lot of you guys like to do that, go, yeah, but the last 100 flights went so well. This is definitely it. No. And Arnold would go, no, you can't live that long. And neither can the entire ancestral line of cockroaches can't live that long. And he has this whole pyramid built for us, and it's pretty fun. So no, you're 1% figuring you're coming up on the one. No, not going to happen.
And and we don't say that to minimize your fear or anything like that. The reason we say this, especially Captain Eric, how many flight hours do you have in total?
Somewhere I'm have everything in the logbook pages. It was fun because those are memories, but I don't have it all totalized yet, but I'm guessing it'll end up between 22 or 23,000
Wow.
in the end.
So
yeah,
over 20,000 hours of flying. So I guess you did stretch that hypothesis right there. And I actually got I remembered, you have to fly for every day for 91 years straight in order on a tier 1 airline, which is US, Europe, China, Australia, New Zealand, to actually hit that. So why are we telling you this? It's because our mantra here is the pain in your brain is not about the plane. I know this sounds like super weird, but it's true. It's not about the airplane. The fear of flying often is what we call in psychology a projection. You know, somewhere where we can kind of like conveniently put something on that because we don't know enough about it. And then it's scary to think of these, you know, we just had these images of these big jet engines, you know, they do look scary, scary, powerful. But so I understand that part, but it's really not about the plane where the fear originates, you know. And one thing I would encourage everyone that hasn't watched that yet, might already be a couple months. I think a couple months, Carrie said, I'm an extraordinary projector. And actually, Carrie, that is awesome because you need that same ability. You know, you need that same ability to project a different reality from the one that your brain is telling you right now that you're more or less a passenger and somewhat feeling helpless, right? So
and you know, one of the other things you were talking about before, and I've only been flying for 4 years, so my experience is this much in comparison. But like I say, no matter how many hours Erica's had in front of the bulletproof doors, we flight attendants have had the few, for me, few experience hours in the back with all the people. In 4 years, I have never seen anybody freak out. And I know that that is a concern and a fear that many of our fearful flyers have, that they are going to get on a plane, they are just going to lose it. And the embarrassment factor, they're so concerned about losing it and being embarrassed or being carted off the plane. Doesn't happen. It really does. I have passengers more upset about the fact I don't have the right kind of drink for them, or I just don't have enough cookies or pretzels, or nowadays we don't have gluten-free or vegan stuff, and they get all wrapped around the axle about that. But whether or not they're fearful, no, we just don't see that. We just don't see that.
And Gina, your friend is really thinking of you. October, November, probably November 1st, then October, some of the most stable atmospheric times of the year, smooth air, and very few people traveling. The kids are in school. That's when the pros go out. So she's really in your corner, unless she scheduled her wedding day on Thanksgiving weekend. In that case, she's not thinking of you. She's only thinking of herself. But it's other than Thanksgiving weekend, you're in. This is going to be a good time to travel.
It's going to be, and you got plenty of time to prepare. Plenty of
absolutely.
time.
And I did put in that every third Thursday of the month, we do have our Cleared for Takeoff 201 monthly group coaching webinar. And that's different from the show here. The webinar is really more a deep dive into, I'm going to say, where the source of the fear really stems from. Now, we do look at triggers. We do look, this upcoming one, we actually, the title is know what to do before your trigger fires, okay? So, because one of the things that we teach is that by the time your trigger is firing, depending on what it is, your biology will take over. So in that moment, you're actually not in control, and you need to learn to recognize that trigger and then start putting in a different, we call it put in a different story, change the way you think about what is going to happen. And we have, like I said, lots of different things to help you with that. And one of those, actually, let me just go here, because I think Charlie, okay. I just want to read that again because it just floated by. Charlie wrote, I love aviation and planes, always have, and my lifelong dream was to be an airline pilot. but for whatever reason, I have become terrified of flying. I'm too scared of being in a crash. Okay. So being in a crash, and the reason why I wanted to catch that one. So that's what we call a mechanical trigger or a mechanical fear of flying. So there's something going on with the plane. There's something going on, with the pilots, whether they're not trained well enough, whether they're, whatever that may be. And it's not ridiculous. I know, because that's what you think, but it's not. And Eric, you can relate to that. It's like during cruise, when there is an altitude change, I know it's just an altitude change, but my brain is freaking out thinking, oh my God, the engine is going quiet. There has been a failure. We're gonna crash. So why does it feel like, because that is definitely a sensation that a lot of people struggle with. What is that? The first one, I think, happens when we level off, right?
So so we first have takeoff power. Somebody just called me I was texting, one of our platinum members called me and said, did you just say that November is the smoothest month of the year? And I said, yes, I did. And there's obviously exceptions, probably when you're going to fly, but I'm still staying with it. So the first one occurs when you have takeoff thrust, and then at 1,000 feet, we retard that power a long ways. We don't need all that power to continue the climb, nor do we want to use it and burn the gas like that. So that's the first one. Then the second one is when we level out at cruise, we don't need the extra thrust that we're using to climb. So the engine power comes way back at cruise when we no longer have to overcome the gravity and move the airplane up. So we're throttling way back there to hold the cruise speed we want. And then the top of the descent, which they may be referring to, the airplane are very efficient, and some of them have better wings than others. But essentially, when we start down, if we're starting down and there's not a lot of traffic in front of us, and we can control our own descent to the airport, we're essentially pulling the engine thrust back to zero, idle power, and letting the airplane glide, sometimes in excess of 100 miles away from the airport. It's the same as if the engine had quit. We're flying using the wings. The engine is there, so yeah, it gets really quiet. We're producing very little thrust, and we're floating downhill to the airport. And I just would frame that as, that's a good thing. We gotta go down sometime. It was good, clean fun, but you don't want to spend the rest of your life in an airplane seat. It wouldn't be good for you.
So I don't know who asked it. I do want to say thank you, Tracy, for answering. I think it was Gina. So basically, Gina, that's one of the things we teach here at Fearless Flight, because one of the biggest challenges of any fear or any phobia is the shame and the embarrassment. And so one of the things that we encourage you to do is when you get to the gate of your flight, that you walk to the gate agent and you identify yourself as an American with a disability. You don't even have to say you're afraid to fly at that point, because at that point you can say, I need a little bit extra time to board. And so that is one of the things that we highly recommend. And then when you do get on the plane, introduce yourself to the flight attendant and just ask to speak to the captain. If you haven't, again, I'm going to encourage you, go through the birds of a feather, use the search function, type in introduce and pilot or something like that, and lots of posts will come up of people who have shared their experiences of when they did and how they were met, with understanding and compassion and, Yeah, Diane, how would you meet somebody that would say, hey, I'm sorry, but I'm really afraid to fly. Is there anything that you can tell me?
Absolutely. And making the assumption that we've already done exactly what you say, and that is to check with our pilots to make sure that one of them, or the other of them, is available to chat briefly with this particular passenger after we do that, and find out where this individual is sitting. And if they're near me, if I'm forward or aft, then I let the other flight attendant know, so that we can, during the course, that we can ask, is there anything that you need to know right now? What can I help you with? And they say, oh, I'm nervous about the sounds, or they'll say the chimes. They want to know what the chimes are for very often. And so a lot of times we can answer those questions right then. And then during the course of the flight, I will come back. I'll kind of squat down in the middle of the aisle and say, hey, how are you doing? And I'll do that during the course of the flight. It's just go by, check, put an arm on their shoulder and say, hey, how are you doing? Do you get any more questions? Something like that. And it's amazing, just those little things of knowing, because we want to help. We want to help our passengers. We want everybody to have a good experience. We want to get them safe and sound, and not only safe and sound to their destination, but having had a good experience. And so we can't do that if we don't know. So if you identify yourself to one or both of the flight attendants, then we can kind of take it from there. And I just really love the opportunity, because, here I've been volunteering with this group now for over 7 years. And so they'll say, I'm afraid to fly. I'm like, boy, did you come to the right place? Have I got some information for you?
Mm.
And it just really helps. It helps us to know, so we can answer your questions and make you feel more comfortable.
Yeah, and just like any flight, even this show has to come to an end. So I do want to encourage all of you. I want to thank you, first of all, for your courage and for asking the questions. And I will go through, if there were any questions that we didn't answer, we'll add them to next week. I'm going to encourage you to tune back in next Tuesday at 6:30 Pacific. And I just want to say, Kay, you're absolutely right. There are many, many people who are afraid to fly. Conservatively estimating at least 60 million Americans. So when you're in one of those narrow body airplanes where there's 3 seats on one side, middle aisle, and 3 seats on the other, statistically speaking, one person in every one of those rows is nervous, anxious, afraid, terrified to fly, anywhere in that range. So you're not alone. And we definitely have a lot of compassion and a lot of tools and strategies and a lot of wisdom, hopefully, for you. So thank you, Captain Eric. Thank you, Diane. I really appreciate you guys taking the time. And let's do this next week.
We'll see you guys next week. We leave with a cliffhanger. We might even be convinced to tell you where Captain Ron went next week.
Maybe.
Yes, if we get an update by then.
All right, there you go. Have a good week, everybody.
All right, good night, everybody.